Well, good morning. Welcome. We're glad you're here. If you're joining with us online, thank you for allowing us to interrupt your Sunday morning routine to be a part of what's happening inside of your house. And we're glad that you're here. And for those that are in the room, good to have you guys here as well. And if we have not met, my name's Rusty, and I have the privilege of being the pastor here at Concord Church. And I'm going to say a lot of things in the next few minutes. And if that gets confusing or you get lost, we want you to know this. God loves you. He does. And because God loves you, we care about you. And we want you to know those two things for sure. And that's what we try to do here as best as we can, is to show God's love to you and to care for you in practical ways. And so wherever you're coming from, whatever's happened to you this week, we want you to know that for sure. And again, great to have you here with us this morning. And as all of you know, we are traveling through a book of the Bible together. We're studying the book of Matthew. And before we get into that today, I want to give you just kind of a little update about where we're heading for the next 2 months or so. And I'm going to preach in Matthew today and then Matthew next week. And then we're going to take a break to get ready for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we're going to be focusing our attention on that and spending some time celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, as all churches all over the world will be doing. So we're going to dive into that. Really excited about that. And then in January, I'm going to be sharing an important message or series of message about us as we get into the new year, 2021. And so I'm putting those pieces together. And then after all that, we will get back into the book of Matthew and continue on in our study of that. So that's where we're going for the next few months. I want you to know that. And today, we're talking about the issue of fear. And I prepared this lesson weeks ago, probably a few months ago, but I think it's very appropriate for us today. And I want to announce to you an observation that I have made, and maybe this is something that you've picked up on as well that might be helpful to you. So let me pull this up here. Let me get the right one. All right, here we go. It's loading. All right, here we are. Nothing divides us like politics, and nothing drives politics like fear. It's my observation. Nothing divides us like politics, right? And we are, can we all just kind of nod our head and say we're kind of a divided people in a lot of ways? Nothing divides us like politics, and nothing drives politics like fear. And we've observed this, you've probably observed this, I know I've observed this, that the campaigns and the ads that we've been seeing and what we've been watching over the past few months has pushed our fear button over and over and over again. And the reason that they do that is because it's effective. We respond as humans in our psychology, we respond to fearful situations. And some of us are fearful of what might happen. We're fearful of what we might lose. We're fearful for the future. Some of us are fearful about the economy. Some of us are fearful about how this COVID-19 reality is going to play out. And so we're fearful about what we may lose in the process of that. Some of us are fearful about what has already happened. Some of us are fearful what has happened in the past could happen again. And so the politicians, the parties have picked up on this, and they have pushed our fear buttons over and over and over again. And this has divided us and got us angry and upset at one another. And that's just a reality that we're all facing today. And if you've experienced that, then I want to remind you of a few things. And especially if you're here today and you would call yourself, I'm a Jesus follower. Like, Jesus is my king. He saved me from my sins. I believe that. I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins. Then I want to say some things, especially to you, about how we respond to this environment of fear, or this politics of fears that we've been facing over the past few months. And it's a reminder of something that we've talked about related to the Gospel of Matthew and what Matthew believed, because we've done the introduction before on this over and over again, and I want to draw your attention to this again. Here's what we've said in the introduction of Matthew. Jesus is do you know it? What do we say? Jesus is what? Jesus is say it out loud, he's the king. The king. He's not a king. He's not a king in a list of other kings. He's not a king that comes along and is going to rise and fall. That is not what Matthew is teaching. This is not a king equal to other kings. Matthew is claiming for us that Jesus is the king above all kings. And that the differential power between Jesus and any other earthly authority is so huge. It is so magnificent. It is so great. Because Jesus' power and his reign and his rule, it is eternal, it is forever, it is on high. It is from everlasting to everlasting. The psalmist tells us that the mountains melt like wax before the Lord. This is who we are dealing with when we are dealing with this King. Jesus is the King. And for us that are Christ followers, this should give us a great level of assurance no matter what happens in the political realm. And there may be changes and there may be shifts and there may be movements on that front. But we can still trust that this has not changed at all. And we do not need a government's blessing or a government's favor in order for us to follow fully our King, Jesus, because Jesus is the King above all kings and above all nations. And we know this to be true. We know that we don't need the government's blessing because the very origins of our faith happened under the cruel Roman Empire. And so as we look into the future, I want to assure everybody that this fact, this theological fact, has not changed. Jesus is the King. And he is from everlasting to everlasting. And he is, as the psalmist tells us, the mountains melt like wax before the Lord. And so we can trust in that. And here's what our King does, and here's what I want to draw your attention to. If you feel fear today, if there's some uncertainty that you're experiencing, here's what I want you to know. The more you trust the King of the world, the less you'll fear the kings in this world. And the less you trust the King of the world, the more you'll fear the kings in this world. Because what this is if you're a Christian in the first century Rome, if you're a Christian that's in a communist country, if you're a Christian that's in South Africa, or you're a Christian that's in some other nation across the world, this reality is something that we as followers of Jesus will face. And if we trust the King, like my allegiance, my dedication, my hope is in this King, then I will not have to fear any king on this planet. And I'm going to make the case for that today as we get into the details of Matthew. And that we can walk with boldness and we can walk with confidence no matter what is happening in the political environment, in the social environment, or in any environment, wherever we may trod or wherever we may go. That Jesus is the King and he is our King. And we have a connection with him by faith. Now, here's what I learned that I want to share with you that I think has been fascinating for us as we think about Jesus and his ministry. Jesus does two things for his followers, those that are Jesus followers. Here's what he does. He calms their fears, and then he sends them out into fearful situations. He calms their fears, and he sends them out in their fearful situation. And you've probably done this, and you've probably experienced this at some level. See if I can explain this to you in a way. I'm going to pull this out. This is my key fob for my car. How many of you are parents of a teenager that's driving? Raise your hand. Oh, we got a few in here. Okay, good deal. Online, you have any parents of teenagers? Okay, I can see you waving. I'm waving back at you. All right, parents of teenagers. How many of you have been a teenager that learned to drive with your parents? Raise your hand. Okay, that's probably the rest of us. All right. Now, what happened probably is that your mom or your dad got you in the car and they calmed your fears or your nervousness around driving, right? So they got you familiar with the steering wheel and the brake and the gas and the pedal and right and left and all that, and when to turn your blinker on and 11 and 2, okay, and all that stuff. And so they got you comfortable, calmed your fears about the issue of driving and about the challenges of driving, and then there came a moment for you, or for if you're a parent of a teenager, where you then took that key and you did what to them? You gave it over to them and said, hey, I want you to go to Schnucks and get us a gallon of milk, or hey, go pick up your sister from practice, or hey, go do some running for me. You put them back into probably their most fearful situation that they're going to be in at that age and stage of their life, because you have walked them through their fears and then you have put them back into a fearful situation because you've done a good job preparing them. Is everybody tracking with me so far in this? This happens when you first drive a car. This happens if you're an engineer of a train. This happens when you're a pilot. You go for your first solo flight. And you face your fears. Your fears are calmed by a good leader, a good coach, a good instructor. And then you put them back into a fearful situation. This is what Jesus does again and again and again in his ministry for his disciples and those that follow him. And he looks at them. He says, I want you to trust me. I want you to trust who I am. I'm going to calm your fear, and then I'm going to put you into some challenging environments. And in the midst of all that, based upon your past experience with me, I want you to know that you and I are going to make it together. That's what Jesus does for his disciples. He calms their fears, and then he sends them out into fearful situations, and we see plenty of examples of this. Now, let me show you how Jesus calms fears, okay? All right, here's a few of the fears that he calms. And he does so through miracles. And this is just Matthew chapters 8 and chapters 9. Okay, so this is just a snippet of what Jesus actually does. Jesus heals a person with leprosy. That calms the fear of being alone. Because as you know, someone that had leprosy in biblical times, they were isolated. They were forbidden from coming into the community. It was kind of like quarantine, all right, if you know what I mean. They had to be off by themselves. And so there was fear of being alone. Jesus heals a centurion's servant. So here's someone that has a servant inside of his household, and he has compassion for this person. He hates that this person is not well, and so he appeals to Jesus, and so Jesus does a miracle on behalf of the centurion. And this is the fear of suffering, of watching someone else suffer. Jesus cast out demons. This is a fear of spiritual oppression. A few of you may know what that's like. A few of you may have experienced this in a family member or in another situation where someone was oppressed spiritually and they were driven down, they were beaten down, they were smacked down by some demonic force that's out there. Jesus cast out demons and drove out this fear. And next is Jesus calms the storm. This is a fear of a natural disaster. Some of you are worried about that, right? Some of you are worried about a natural disaster. Whenever the storm clouds form up or whenever there's a tornado warning, there's a blood pressure increase in you. And there's a sense of panic that comes over you. And we see that Jesus can calm the storms, and he deals with the fear of natural disaster. Forgiveness. And forgives and heals a person paralyzed. This is a fear of being destitute. In this day and age of the first century, if you were paralyzed and you could not walk, this was basically a death sentence for you, unless you had an extended family that would care for you and look after you. And then Jesus brings a dead girl back to life, a fear of losing a loved one. Some of you have been through this. Some of you walked down this road of grief, saying goodbye to a loved one that was very close to you. In all of this, Jesus performs miracles, but what Jesus is doing when he acts in a miraculous kind of way, he is actually dealing with a human fear, and he does so in front of his disciples who are watching him, who are learning from him, who are following in his footsteps. And so if all this is true, let me ask you a question. This is a question I want us to camp on for just a moment. Do you trust Jesus with your fear? Do you trust Jesus with your fear? If it's true that the king, he's the king. He's not a king, he's the king. And if it's true that the king has the power to move on our behalf, if that's true, then we should be very careful about the fears that we allow to rise up inside of our heart. So what is your fear that you have right now? What's the thing that you're worried about? What's the thing that's kind of stirred up your stomach acids? What's that issue that keeps you up at night? You're trying to go to sleep and you just can't turn your brain off, and this keeps coming up again and again and again and again. What's the thing that kind of makes you a little angry? And you're tense about what could happen in the future. Okay, if we believe that Jesus is the king and that Matthew chapter 8 and chapter 9 is not just a religious document, but it's recording history, then we should be very confident in what Jesus can do for us. And maybe it's true that Jesus does not do a miraculous work on your behalf for your particular incident or your particular fear. But doesn't it give you some level of assurance knowing that I'm associated, I'm connected to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and that He's King over the universe and He knows me and He knows me by name? Shouldn't that give you some level of confidence and assurance? I believe that it does. And so what we're going to see in a moment is that Jesus sends out His disciples after calming their fears, after demonstrating His miraculous power, after showing all that He can do, that He then, after calming their fears, sends them into a kind of a challenging, fearful environment. And if you feel like you're about to usher into some kind of unknown, fearful environment, then here's what I want you to know. Jesus is the King. And He sees you and He knows you. And the differential power between Him and any other king of this world is so huge. Never lose sight of that. And that again and again, Jesus will use His power, His privilege, His majesty, and His royalty on your behalf and for your goodness and for His glory. So with that said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your Bibles and turn to Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10 is where we are. Matthew chapter 10. And let me give you a little background here, and then we'll dive into the passage. So Jesus has just spent some months calling His 12 disciples. He's been preaching and teaching, going to synagogues, preaching about the new kingdom, about what He's doing. And then He's also explaining the gospel, or the good news, about you can have a right relationship with God through a connection with Him. And then along the way, as we've just discovered, He's healing people. He's doing miraculous works. And this whole time, the disciples are there, and they are following with Him, and they are taking notes and they're observing. And so as they're learning, they're growing in their faith and understanding of Jesus. And then Jesus does something. He gives them the car keys. He sends them out on their own, sends them into a fearful situation. And then I want you to notice a very important detail about how Jesus does this. Okay, let's start there in verse 1 of chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10. Are you guys there? Everybody there? All right, give me a minute as I fix my mic here. It's getting a little squirrely. All right, Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus called His 12 disciples, this is His followers, okay, to Him and gave them, let's say this word together, gave them what? Authority. Key word here. Gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. In other words, Jesus says, what I've been doing, I want you to do. What I've been doing, how I've been tracking, my behavior, that's now your behavior. That's the relationship between a rabbi and the disciples, between a teacher and a student, between the coach and the player. You with me? I'm going to do this, I'm going to show this, I'm going to model this for you, and then I'm sending you out to do this on your own. I'm giving, and the way that you're going to be able to do this is this word right here. It is through my authority. I'm going to give you a little bit of my authority in order to do what I've called you to do. And here's the lesson, and this is kind of the bottom line of the whole sermon right here. If you want to get the sermon, this is the sermon right here. This is it. Point number 1. This is this. Submission to Jesus' authority gives you authority. Submission to Jesus' authority. The ultimate authority. Because Jesus is the, what is He? Say it with me. Jesus is He's the King. Not a king, He's the King. And when I submit, when I surrender my life, when I give my life over to Jesus' authority, then I can walk in confidence and boldness in what I'm doing, how I'm behaving, and how I'm acting. Because I now have His authority on my side. I love the way the Proverbs writer puts it. He says, as the wicked flee, though no one pursues them. So they're motivated by fear. Like, oh no, someone's going to find me, someone's going to catch me, someone's going to figure this out. So they flee though no one pursues them. But the righteous are as, say it with me, they are as bold. I'm living right. In other words, I've surrendered my life to the right and proper authorities as it's defined by the God of the Bible. And then that makes me as bold as a lion. I put it this way, fearing Jesus helps me overcome every other fear. Now, since it's Veterans Day and that we're observing, I thought a military illustration would be helpful. And so let me line out some things for you here. When I was in the Army, I was this. I was an E4 specialist. I was not a high-ranking guy. I did one tour, 3 years, got in, got out, and I made it to an E4, okay, which is just kind of basically above a private, okay? But I served in an infantry unit, and the person that was the be-all, end-all, total authority in our infantry unit was our captain, okay? And his name was Captain Hiller. Now, I had a great job in the Army, and I was this guy's RTO, which is his radio operator. And so basically, we were out in the field training, or if we're on a live mission, what I would do is I would simply just relay his messages to the rest of the people. And so and our company commander was a man named Captain Hiller. Learned a great respect for this man. I learned a lot about leadership from him and watching him lead and watching him command troops. And I just learned so much from him. And as his RTO, I would take his commands and then in his decrees and what he would say for us to do, and then I would relay them to someone like this. Now, this is a sergeant first class. This is E7. Okay, this is someone who's been in the Army a long, long time, has a lot of rank, a lot of experience, knows more than me, more proficient than me, more educated than me, has been to more battles than I've been. Okay, just outranks me in all kinds of ways. But what I would have to do as RTO is I would have to take my company commander's commands through the radio and convey them to this E7 who outranked me. Everybody with me so far? Now, as long as I stayed under the authority of Captain Hiller, I could speak these commands with boldness. You see that? I had great confidence. Why? Because whose authority am I operating under? Captain Hiller, my company commander. And so even though I did not outrank this guy, I was working underneath his authority. The same thing is true for us as believers. Our ultimate authority is Christ the King. He has called us to do and work and operate in certain ways and treat people in certain ways. And when we respond to that in obedience, we don't have to worry about the other authorities that are out there, because those authorities, including this E7, this guy is underneath Captain Hiller. And so the other authorities that are there, we just respond to Jesus' authority. And so anytime, whether it's a nation, whether it's a government, whether it's a city, anytime there's a governmental change, we make note of that, and then we get back to following Jesus. We take notice of that and say, okay, I see what's going on. I see the new change now. Okay, now I'm going to get back to obeying Jesus. I'm going to get back to following Jesus because he's my ultimate king. He's my ultimate authority. And this is the exact relationship that I had with our company commander, and Jesus is doing the exact same thing with his disciples. He says, I'm going to train you. I'm going to educate you. I'm going to show you how to do this, and then I'm going to send you out into the world, and then I want you to live this out on your own. But you're going to do so by my authority. Because Jesus is say it with me, Jesus is he's the king. He's the king. The more we believe in the strength and sovereignty of Jesus, the less vulnerable we should be to modern day fear tactics. If we just keep focusing that Jesus is our king, we can be rock solid. We can step out in confidence. We can be bold as a lion. Again, this is not cockiness. This is not ignoring, truth and validation of other sources. It's not that at all. But it's saying, look, I have a guide by which I live my life. This is how I operate. And when I follow Jesus as my king, it doesn't matter what happens in the other arenas of life, because I'm going to obey him. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to see here. The real test of obedience of Jesus begins out there. Let's look at this. Verse 5. Verse 5, Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. We get the list of the disciples, the 12 that Jesus had called. And then here's what he does. These 12, Jesus sent, say it with me, sent out. Sent out. Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any of the town of the Samaritans. So this is like a limited, we're kind of a test run, kind of mission that you're on here. So I'm going to give you a very, very strict parameters about where you're to go. Okay. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. Okay. That's where I want you to focus here for this mission trip. And as you proclaim the message of the kingdom of heaven, as you go, proclaim this message. The kingdom of heaven has come near. And then here's what I want you to do. I want you to heal the sick. I want you to raise the dead. I want you to cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. In other words, I want you to benefit, bless, help, and you lift up out of sickness. I want you to do all that because listen to what I've given you. I've given you authority. You have my authority. I've given it to you. It's not your authority. I'm granting it to you. And so as you've received this authority and this instruction, I want you to freely give. Here's the word that I think is so essential for us. Now let me talk to people that are longtime Christians, been in the church a long time, part of the church for a long time. Here's what I want to remind you. Don't fall in love with inside Christianity. Don't do it. Don't fall in love with inside Christianity. The heart-pounding adventure of Jesus' call is almost always on the outside of the church building. Don't believe me? Look at this. Matthew 28. Go and make disciples of all nations. What's next? John 20:21. As the Father sent me, Jesus said, so I sent you. Jesus saying, look, God sent me from heaven to earth. I mean, that was like a huge mission trip. That's like, coming to a very totally different culture. Okay, I'm coming from the culture of heaven down to the culture of earth and coming in the form of a baby into a manger. Big change on your behalf. Okay, so as the Father sent me, I'm going to do the same to you. I'm sending you out. And then also in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, you shall be my witnesses. Where, Jesus? Oh, in Jerusalem, and all Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Jesus sends us out. Jesus has a way of sending us out in that way. Now here's the pattern I want you to get. We train on the inside of church. That's what this is. It's training, education. I'm going to stand up and explain the Bible to you, what Jesus has to say to you. So nothing wrong with that. We need to do that. That's always going to be a part of church. We train on the inside, but we proclaim on the outside. Obeying Jesus happens out there. That's where it takes place. That's where it makes the difference. And I'm going to tie back into that in just a moment. Okay, at the end. So let me just touch on point 3, and then we're going to get to kind of the conclusion here because it's an important one. Then Jesus predicts the challenging realities for his followers. And if you were to read the next few verses, 16 on, you would see that Jesus is forecasting for his disciples. There's hardship, there's flogging, there's going to be imprisonment. There's going to be some challenges facing them. In other words, I'm going to send you. You think this is a rough environment. Wait till I send you out, and that you're confronted with Rome. And what we know from church history is that 11 of the 12 disciples died martyr's death. They died because they had faith and allegiance to Jesus Christ. And so Jesus is forecasting for us as Christ followers, there's going to be a challenge in front of you as you live out your faith in front of the culture. That should not surprise you at all, and we've seen that borne out in the rest of the New Testament. Okay? So you can read that on your own, and I challenge you to do that from verse 16 to verse 22. So here's what I want you to see, okay? Because I don't want you to lose the key point. The disciples' previous experience, training, and prayer with Jesus equipped them for the future trials of serving Jesus. Okay? Jesus trained them, calmed their fears, showed his miraculous work. Everything's okay. I'm king. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate how serious that is. I am the king over all kinds of areas. And then I'm going to push you a little bit. Do your first mission trip, and then I'm going to tell you it's going to get even worse from this. And so here are 2 key questions, and then I'm going to give you an application. Here's the 2 key questions. How much time are you spending with Jesus? How much time are you spending with Jesus? It's the basics of our Christian faith. It's prayer. It's Bible study. It's engaging with other Christians. it's spending meditation alone in front of Jesus. How much time? How much of your, when I say time, I say how much of your life are you setting aside and you're saying, okay, Jesus, this is time for you and me. Meditation, reflection. I want to know you. I want to pursue you. I want to be your disciple because you're my king, you're my teacher, you're my rabbi, you're my master. And I have some fears. And in that process, Jesus will calm your fears. And then what Jesus will ultimately do, he'll nudge you out into some dangerous types of situations. And how you're proclaiming the message out there. So, here's the application. Here's what I want you to do if you're a Christ follower here. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to open up your calendar and mark off some specific time with Jesus. I don't want this to just kind of go away. I don't want this to dissipate. I don't want you to, kind of wave on your way out. Good message, Pastor Rusty. Thank you so much. See you next week. That is not what I want. I mean, you can compliment me on the message. That's okay. You can do that if you'd like. I want you to make this real. I want you to pull up your iCalendar account. I want you to pull up whatever you do to keep your life in order. I want you to pull out that Monday morning 9 a.m. or maybe it's Tuesday night at 8:30 after the kids go to bed. I want you to pull that out. I want you to mark down. I'm going to spend some time with Jesus this week. I'm going to spend some time reflecting on that. And then I want you to take a walk in your community and to connect with your neighbors. These are the two things that would help you follow Jesus even in fearful situations. Now, if you're here today and the idea of sharing your faith wigs you out, or you just feel like, I don't feel comfortable sharing my faith. I feel like that's just wrong. I don't feel like that's my place. I feel like just talking about my faith publicly and Jesus publicly, that's just weird. I'm not sure that I can do that. And I would ask you to raise your hand if you feel that way, but you're probably even timid to do that. So I won't do that, all right? But if that's you, if you're here today and you're like, I just feel a little uncomfortable doing that, or like even kind of broaching that subject about my faith and about my dedication to Jesus, I feel like that's private. I'm not sure that needs to be part of public discourse. Here's what I want you to do. I'm asking you to consider doing this, okay? If you don't know what to do, here's what I want you to do. Observe Jesus' interaction with people. Pick a gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Your choice. And just observe. How does Jesus engage other people? And then make notes about what you read. I want you to write it down. I want you to write down, Jesus responded in this way. Jesus, he took the conversation in this direction. Jesus, his demeanor or his attitude or his actions were actually surprising in this way. Write down notes, your observations about what you see Jesus doing inside the Gospels. And here's what I'm saying. Don't take my word for it. If you're having a hard time believing me and following me on this, like, I just feel nervous, I don't know okay, that's fine, I get that. But then get back to Jesus because he's the king. Follow with him in the Gospels on your own account, in your own way, and record what Jesus does. And then pray for the Father's help in following Jesus. Because that's what this requires. And then go out there in your neighborhood, out there in your community. Don't fall in love with inside Christianity. It's good to have Christian friends. It's good to have Christian community. I love it. I mean, my life's built around that. I love talking about the Bible, conversing. It's so great doing that with my neighbors, doing that with my friends, and that's wonderful. Okay, but what we need to be alerted to, what we need to be reminded of, we need to push ourselves a little bit into some fearful situations. And that means bridging some conversations and engaging some conversations with people that may be uncharted territory. But here's what I know. If you've spent time with Jesus, and if you're praying with Jesus, and you're listening to Jesus, then Jesus is going to lead you in that moment when the moment comes. Because here's what I know. Here's what Matthew knows. And here's what I want you to remember. Jesus is the King. He's the King, and he's your King. He knows you, and he loves you. And when we obey Jesus, no matter what's happening in the world around us, when we obey Jesus, we can walk in confidence and not in fear. Will you bow your heads with me for just a moment? If you're in the building or watching with us online, just take a moment and pause. I've said a lot here today. But what I want you to know is that we can trust in our King. And there is no societal shift that can take place that alters the sovereignty of our King. So the question that's in front of you right now is, do you trust Jesus with your fear? Do you trust him? And if the idea of talking about your faith publicly to someone, whether at work or at the office or at a family gathering or online, feels weird, feels scary, feels threatening, well, could that be where God's leading you? Is that God handing over the car keys to you? Is that God leading you into a little danger? Well, that's what Jesus does. That's where faith becomes alive. That's where the adventure is. So if you're nervous about that, you don't have to be. Read the Gospels. Follow Jesus. Don't take my word for it. Read it for yourselves. Write down Jesus' interaction with other human beings. Let those thoughts and those ideas be your guide for your next conversation. And then pray. And here's what I want us to pray. God, give me an opportunity to reflect you. God, give me an opportunity to obey you and to go out there and to publicly manifest my faith through conversation, through kindness, through some act that demonstrates who you are in your kingdom. God, I'm obeying you. And I know there's been a shift and there's a change and things look ugly and they're so uncertain. We don't know. Oh my, but God, you're the King. So Father, I'm asking you as pastor and leader here, I'm asking you to grant peace to those that may feel fear this morning. And God, I'm asking you to speak to their hearts as they open up your word and read it for themselves about what you have done through the Gospels. And may they notice how your Son, Jesus the Christ, interacted with other human beings. May that be our guide for how we respond and how we choose our words and how we treat those that are different than us. And as we make those notes and as we reflect on that, may we take that extra step to go out there, because the faith adventure, it's out there with your work and what you're doing in this world. And along the way, we can know the thrill of what it means to fully obey our King. Father, I pray that people would have a strong awareness of that today. For those that are here today or listening online, that this is new to them, I pray that they would trust Jesus with their fears, whatever they may be. There could be a fear of sickness, a fear of tragedy, a fear of a health issue, a fear of a financial collapse. Father, may they turn to Jesus and surrender their lives to him. May they see him as the good King that he is, with his benevolent and gracious reign over their lives. And so, Father, these are the things that we request, and we pray it in the name that's above all names, the kingly name of Jesus. We pray it in his name, and all God's people said, amen and amen. Well, I hope you've been encouraged today by this message. If you're watching with us online, thank you for doing so. If you have questions or comments, please reach out to us. You can do that with the prayer partners that are there, or you can contact us this week. Thank you so much for being a part of our service. God bless. Have a great day.